amazing grace of God. It is an invasion of the sovereign love of God, penetrating the gap of darkness with the overwhelming power of His marvelous light. It bridges the gap between man and God. Take a journey through the amazing grace of God with your host, Sarah Abraham, as she shares the compelling stories of those who walked in His covenant and have overcome by the amazing grace of God. Join us weekdays this fall for Amazing Grace with Sarah Abraham.
Welcome to Amazing Grace. I'm your host, Sarah Abraham. Thank you for watching us. We really appreciate it. I know there's different, more fun and exciting channels for you to watch, but thank you for your dedication. Thank you for your support. It's because of your encouraging words and your testimonies that you share with us, how we were helpful to you, is what motivates us to bring this kind of program to you every day. And I hope this program, the next 25 minutes, will be a blessing to you. It empowers you. We have such a beautiful, authentic Texan, Miss Amber Butaud. Did I murder your last name?
No, that's pretty close. It's Butaud, the D silent.
Butaud, D is silent.
Yes.
So what is it, French?
Yes, it is.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's wonderful.
Thank you.
So Amber, tell us a little bit about your childhood, where you grew up, authentic Texan.
Well, I grew up in a small town called Stephenville, Texas, which is actually the cowboy capital of the world.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So it was a very small town. My dad was a dentist, and we were a typical American family in a small country town, rode horses and played sports and went to school. And my dad had gone to dental school and became a dentist, but then also went to seminary. So he had a strong calling on his life to start a church. So we started a church in the small town, and I guess I kind of grew up the small country town American little girl kind of way, you know, playing in the dirt and riding horses and country and all of that.
Staying in church.
Staying in church, yes.
That's important.
Church was what we knew. You went on Wednesdays, you went on Sundays, and every day in between you had the church to your house, you know. So that was just the way we grew up. And it was a sweet childhood that I had. I had 3 brothers. I was the only girl. So
And you were the oldest?
No, I was third.
Third, okay.
So I have 2 older and 1 younger.
Okay.
And needless to say, I tried to keep up with the boys.
With the boys.
All the time. Yeah. You know, the toughness just came naturally by me because I had to be as tough as they were.
I understand because I grew up with 5 boys.
Oh, goodness.
So nothing girly in my house.
No. Yes.
I mean, one TV we had, so it was either sports, sports, sports.
Right.
Nothing else,
Yes.
you know.
I tease all the time because if you put a football game on, I just feel at home and it makes me
That's
want to
right.
just rest because
And then
it's all I
I had a
heard.
son for 10 years before I had my daughter.
Okay.
And so I was pretty comfortable with him. We could talk stats and who was recruited from what college and all that stuff. And, you know, and this comes this girly girl. I don't even know what to do with her. Always wanted a
Yes.
girl because we never had a girl. So always
Same
wanted
here.
a girl.
Yes.
But when she came along, even now, this, you know, all these concerts and my God, this makeup, well, gray shoes is a gray shoes for me. There's no different shades of gray. You know, a red shoe is a red.
Yeah.
So if you have a gray, a red, and a black, and a beige, I'm done. And my
Yeah.
daughter would say, Mom, that really don't go with that shade. What's wrong with that? Black goes with everything.
Yes.
So I understand. So horses and
Yeah. We played lots and lots of sports. My whole family was really athletic, and I went on to high level in sports and just have always really loved athletics and those type things. And so between just the all-around American family of being able to, you know, go to a small school and play the sports, and my dad being a dentist of the town, and us having a church there, and everything. My family moved us. I was actually born in Conroe here in Houston, And my dad really wanted us to grow up in that small environment.
Town. Okay.
In the small town, and be able to go to a small church there and to a smaller school and know everybody and that. And so we achieved that. I feel
How far
like
is
as a young,
Stephenville from Houston?
it's about 4 hours northwest
Okay.
from here, so it's a pretty good haul to my mom's house now. But
So mom still lives there?
yes, my mom still lives there, still lives in our same house that we had growing up, and it's a little much for her to keep taking care of, but we all are glad that she's still there, and it's still home when we go
Still
back.
home. Same home?
Yep, same home.
How old is she?
So 60s. Well, I don't know. Do we tell a woman's age?
No, okay.
Right? Yes,
Okay.
but yeah, she somewhere in there.
Somewhere in there. And she's
Yes.
still healthy, does all her stuff herself.
Yeah, you know, we've really been believing God for a lot of healings in her body due to the accident that we'll talk about here in a little bit. It really, really took a toll on her body. And so she's been in and out of the hospital ever since. And she still takes care of herself. She's the strongest woman I know.
I think so, because when talking to your
Truly.
brother, she said she went back to the rodeo circuit after
Yes,
that. And I
she
said,
did.
wow,
She did.
wow.
And even before my dad passed, my mom, which, as we've talked, I was not exactly the girly girl, right? Because I was tough. I'm going to keep up with the boys all the time. But I think a small part of my mom really wishes that I had been some sort of a girly girl. She put me in a pageant, and I was so
Miserable.
frustrated with her that she put me in this pageant. And, you know, when God things happen in your life, you just remember them all the way to this point in my life. This was back when I was 15 years old, you know. And she put me in this pageant, and I got to the end question or whatnot, and they asked me who was the person that I looked up to the most, and she was who I answered. She was my answer. She was such a strong, godly woman influence in my life, and she was just kind of that rock always. There wasn't much panic in her life. She always stayed calm and steady with us. She was always there trying to do the best for us as her kids, and I just admired her as a woman of the Lord. And so even before and after, she has kept
So she's a
calming.
Proverbs 31 woman.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we all go through, when tragedy hits in our lives, we deal with it differently. Every single one of us does. And she wasn't without her faults. None of us are. But she's remained that strong, unconditional mother to me. And that I am truly appreciative for.
Amber, take us back, what you remember, and what was your reaction about that tragic day of the accident?
So that day, we'll go back the day before. The day before, my dad was referred to as the cowboy dentist. And that was because my dad was the personality that was an all or nothing. Whether he was into motorcycles, we had, you know, lots of motorcycles, and we all did it together as a family. And then he would, I'm done with that, and then he would buy old cars. And then we all had old cars, and we were so embarrassed because he would take us to school in the old car, you know, that he was fixing up and whatnot. And at this point, he was into horses, and he was learning to rope and ride and team rope, and it was something the whole family could do
together.
And that's what he was really passionate about. Anything that would bring us together as a family. Especially at this time, all of us were becoming into our teens and had been well into our teenage years, and so he was wanting us to stay together as a family, except for my younger brother, who was 9. But he also could do it as well as ride. And I wasn't as much a fan of the riding and the horses and all of that. I was still strong into sports. And so that night before, we had all gone to the rodeo together, and I'd watched them and everything. And we'd come back. Well, the next night was the finals for them. And I wasn't feeling very well. So I chose to stay home. And I will never forget, still to this day, standing in my kitchen of my house next to a glass table with a wallpaper wall, and standing there, and my dad looking at me and saying how much he loved me, and we hugged and we kissed and we said goodbye. I believe to this day that was a favor from the Lord for me. that I got to say bye to my dad in that kind of way. And we hugged and we kissed, and I never saw him again. I was to meet them for dinner that night. So I was home waiting for them, and about almost midnight, I get a phone call. And back then, we had the phones, you know, that you picked up that were connected to the wall, right? And so we had our line and my parents' line, and typically if my phone rang late or my parents' phones rang late, I was like, oh no, like somebody's calling my parents' line trying to call my line. So I answer the phone and I'm like, hello, thinking that it's going to be a friend of mine. And it's a lady on the other line in panic saying, your whole family has been in a car wreck. And I'm like, oh, brother, do I have to go pick them up? I mean,
What's the first thing that comes to your mind?
yeah, a fender bender. I had no idea the tragedy that had just hit my life. Because we were that all-American family that loved the Lord and was strong in the Lord and all of that. I refer to that as we were walking in the light. Darkness hit my family at that moment. And I say to her, oh, where do I need to pick them up? She says, no, 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 Amber. Your entire family has been care flighted to different hospitals. I said, what? And she said, you've just got to get to the hospital. And I'm like, what hospital? And at that moment, I still could not fathom truly the in-depth of what had happened in my family. But my grandmother, which was my dad's mother, that was like a mother to us. She lived next door to us our whole life. And we called her Mimi. She was the sparkle of my life. And I hang up the phone and I go running next door to tell my grandmother, don't answer the phone because I know she's going to have a very difficult time with that. And as I'm banging on the door telling her not to answer the phone, I hear her say hello. And she gets the call that changes her life. And she's crying, I'm crying. We go to the hospital. The first hospital we go to is in Stephenville, where my oldest brother was there. And we walk in, and they're whisking him away to the emergency room, and he's just covered
in blood.
And he is hollering, pray for Dad, Dad needs our help. Pray for Dad, Dad needs our help. That's all he can say. And I'm running after him, and I run to him at the door, and I look to him all scraped up and bloodied up with tears running down his face and breathing. He says, you have to pray for Dad. You just have to pray for Dad. And so they leave him for medical attention, and I go back. This time, other people had heard in the town because it was only 14 miles from our house.
And he's the pastor and the dentist, so the community.
And they all knew our vehicles,
family.
and it's just a small town. And so at this point, people start showing up to the hospital, and nobody wants to tell me that my dad has passed away. And so I eagerly keep saying, just take me to my dad. And this is where I say the hope was taken from my life that led me to the darkness. When you lose hope, it's a dangerous place to become. And I keep asking, just take me to him, just take me to him. If you take me to him, I know that he'll feel my presence. I know that he will fight for us, and I know that. And nobody says anything, and finally, somebody looks at me and says, he's already been taken to the funeral home. Your dad did not make it. And at that point, the hope was yanked from me. I had never felt that before.
It just felt so empty.
Yes, like just that hopelessness. That lost feeling. Without hope, you feel lost. And Christ is the only one that can bring that hope back. He was the spiritual leader of our family. And he was all I knew is that spiritual leader of my family. And I believe at about that age of 16, through your teen years, you depend on the spiritualness of your family.
Yes.
And you are taught and trained and shown the ways of spiritualness through your family. And at some point in there, you have to start to pick that up on your own and make that journey yourself. I was right at that place. I still depended on them so much for my spiritual faith and leading and guiding me. And that was just whisked away. And from there, we went to the hospital where my mother was. I didn't recognize her. She was in the ER, and I walked around the corner, and I looked in, and they slammed the curtains, and I was like, was that my mom? Because her whole face was crushed in.
Oh.
And she was denying services in and out of consciousness. At the same time, my brother was on a table next to her, my middle brother, his name was Corey. He was on life support. And he had tubes just everywhere, all around him. And they had them stable. And after an hour or so at the hospital, they said we could go in and see them.
So this was a different hospital.
This is a different hospital. This was over an hour drive away. This is a different hospital. And my younger brother that was 9, he was in another hospital. And so we get to go in and talk to them. I had called the hospital and told them not to tell my siblings that my father had not made it, because I would have liked to have done that to my own family. And so I walked in and had to tell my mom that my dad did not make it, in which that point she just screamed, "No, this cannot be. No, this cannot be." And I only had a few minutes with her before they had to take her away to do surgeries and stuff. Then the same with my brother. I had to tell him, and he's still tubed and everything. And I just rubbed him and laid my hands on him, and I told him that his brain was hemorrhaging and swelling and all these complications. But through that all, he understood what I said because he made a frown face. His lip came out, and he made a frown face. He did not cry or nothing. Once again, he was taken away to surgery. I went into the hall of the hospital and I sat down and I just cried and said, "Lord, what now?"
So other than your grandmother, none of your immediate family was there?
No, my older brother came. Later he came to the hospital and he was there after being attended to. And then
he was the least injured.
He was the least injured. And then we went to my little brother, and we didn't tell him for a couple of days because he was alone in the other hospital by himself. And we waited until the hospital would release him to bring him over to my mother and all of us in the hotel. Well, my other brother couldn't be in there because he was still in critical condition, but to where he could come to my mother and we could tell him together as a family. So then we had to relive that again 2 days later. And my oldest brother had tried to do CPR on my father, and it didn't. He thought it didn't work, but he had
already
passed. Yes. So the whole incident was very tragic in itself. And at 16 years old, I found myself as the only one that could make decisions medically for my family, to try to become that strong pillar for them.
That's a lot to ask of a 16-year-old.
Yeah, but it's amazing how God shows up. You may not recognize it in those times, and you may feel alone, but He doesn't ever leave us. He doesn't. And as I look back now, and I look back on the story and telling it, I see where He was there so much of the way. And the small little things that He was doing along the way that, honestly, I just wasn't looking for. And I thank Him today for the times that He was there carrying us when we couldn't walk, when we couldn't be.
Just like the footsteps says.
Yes.
I don't see the footsteps. That's when I carried you.
Yes.
So were your mom or anybody other than you could attend your dad's funeral?
Well, they made a special occasion for us because they weren't going to release them because they were so critical. So we extended time for the funeral, but then the hospital made an exception and let them go. And so so all 3 of my family members were in a wheelchair, and we pushed them there. My mom was on a stretcher by the end of the funeral. So we all got to attend the funeral, and that was
say your goodbyes.
Say our goodbyes, and nice, and that was allowed. But then after that's when the real journey. I say when tragedy hits, you're in such shock in the tragedy. It's 2 weeks after that when the shock wears off.
Sinks in.
And your reality, everyone else goes back to what they have known as reality in their life, but you cannot.
Your life has changed forever.
Forever. And there is such a beautiful thing that God has done through family, through marriage and the family, and what a blessing and a true gift that is. And that's why the enemy is so against the marriage and family.
Correct.
Because there is no substitute for it. There is not a substitute.
Absolutely not.
At that point in my life, I went on a journey of trying to find that same thing again. That peace, that joy, that comfort, that no matter where you are, as long as you're all together, you feel that, because that was a gift given by the Lord through marriage and family. And that was wrought for us.
And see, that's what was instilled in you guys by your father.
Yes.
Because no matter what he did, he wanted to include the whole family.
Yes.
Or do something what the whole family as a unit can enjoy.
Yes.
And that's what is lacking nowadays. Everybody wants to do their own little thing.
Right, right. And I just recently took a trip to France and just returned. And my husband didn't travel with me and the children. And when I came home, and we're all in the car together, leaving the airport, and I say to my husband, there is not a better feeling in the world than all of us being together in the same place of our sweet little family that God has blessed us with. And there's no substitute for that. But we went on a journey of trying to find that again, and that void that was in our life. And the mistake that I made was looking to the world to fill that, and not to my Heavenly Father to become all of my Father. Right? When I had an earthly father here, I hung on to him.
Yes.
Is a kind of a picture of my Heavenly Father, and I was learning how to hold on to God as everything to me. And
because your dad was visible, he was right
Yes.
there. God is invisible. It's by faith.
yes,
And it's kind of hard for a 16, 17-year-old who's kind of like the rug was pulled from under you.
yes.
So take me through the steps on how did you get over this?
So for the next probably 7 years, my mom's in and out of the hospital, and kind of spirals into some depression and drinking and things of that matter that I hadn't really been exposed to in my life. And so I'm trying to help her, and I'm trying to help my younger brother, and things like that. And I kind of walk through what I call the desert or the dark of my life. Like I said, turning to the world to feed the pain and the void that was in my life. About maybe not quite 7 years, 6 years after, I felt like I had just made a wreck of my life. And the turning point for me was one day I said to the Lord, Lord, I have made a mess of my life. I have tried to do this all on my own, and I cannot. I rededicated my life to the Lord. I was saved at a young age as a little girl, baptized, but I chose to not turn towards Him. I chose to turn to the world. And at that awakening moment of my life, when I rededicated my life to the Lord and I said, Lord, I turn it all back over to you. I learned something at that point in my life. I had lived in such darkness, I couldn't tell what was dark, what was right and what was wrong. What was right seemed so wrong, and what was wrong seemed so right. And I knew the Lord was trying to bring me back to Him. So the Lord and I went on a journey of me falling asleep. I went to my first Christian counselor. I rededicated my life. I went to my first Christian counselor and bought my own Bible again, not my kids' Bible, which many of us all hold on to, right? But I bought a study Bible. I bought the book Boundaries, which was a fabulous book to recommend. And literally, I just would fall asleep in the Word and in the book every night. And asking the Lord to change my heart, change my ways. And He taught me this. He said, if you can't do it, without shouting it from the top of your lungs, do not do it, because nothing good grows in the dark. If you are trying to hide or sneak around or not sure of, bring it to the light, and I will guide you in the light. So in that moment, that's how I started living my life back to the Lord. I started saying, if I can't do it without shouting it from the top of my lungs, I will not do it.
Not do it.
If I can't stand in my front yard and
Scream.
just scream it. If I couldn't plaster it on a billboard on I-45, don't do it. And that was when I really started coming back and trying to find truth in my life and pulling, as God was pulling me from the dark into the light. And through that, I went on an amazing journey with the Lord of finding Him to be my Father and guiding me and leading me. But I'm here to tell you that this is not an easy thing, but it is such a joyful thing. Sometimes the easy path isn't the right path. Sometimes we have to take the path less traveled. And it was dedication and knowing and a belief that the Lord had put in my heart that I knew if I read the Word, I knew if I showed up at church and got fed in my spirit, that I slowly would gain strength on the inside to do what was right.
Because the seeds were already planted there. You had to water it and nurture it and let it grow.
Yes, yes, and that was the journey that I went on, was, you know, being able to water it and grow it. And over that time, I heard from the Lord to become a Christian counselor, and that was the journey that I stepped into ministry. And through that, I have been able to use what the enemy tried to steal in my life for the glory of the kingdom.
Of God.
For the glory of God.
Amber, thank you for being here and sharing this painful journey of your life and how you have overcome. You are an overcomer, amazing, beautiful woman of God, and how God has used you. And you know, you are a part. God doesn't force you to do anything, but you allowed Him to use what the enemy had planned for the worst, for the destruction of a godly family. And every one of you. I remember talking to your brother, who was only 9 at that time, and how this incident changed. And I am positive, I am 100% sure that this testimony has empowered you, encouraged you. So no matter what you go through in your life, it could be sickness, it could be death, it could be separation, it could be abandonment, wherever, God, our God will always come through and help you. So be encouraged. God is always there for you. So till next time, keep walking in the amazing grace of God.